All righty. Good morning, everybody. Y'all can say good morning in the room. You know that? I was going to say, those of y'all who are out there watching, we do have, of course, a couple folks in the room here this morning, but we're here to tell you about some exciting changes with the intervention tab for actually as of the first of the year. So we've had a couple of major changes, a couple of minor changes. First of all, let's go ahead and jump in to see what's new for 2017-18. The first one is that with the new SB1 legislation, the new high school legislation, high school benchmark entry is no longer a required piece. However, let me say to you that if you have already input that data for this school year, you still need to go in and indate that and put a result code in there. So remember that all intervention records have to have an end date and they have to have a results code. So if you did that before this change was enacted, you'll still need to go in and clear out those records. Now keep in mind that even though the benchmark entry data is not required into Infinite Campus, that you are still, one, required to offer the courses or the opportunities at the high school, and two, you have to have the documentation. So you still have to, somewhere in the school, have a plan for that student, an RTI plan for that student, and you still have to have progress monitoring for that student. The only difference between what you were doing before is that it is not required entry into the intervention tab. So again, let me reiterate that. While high school benchmark entry is no longer required into the tab, everything else that you were having to do is still required. Those courses, that opportunity to receive intervention is still required. Now, I've gotten a lot of questions about the next one. As of January 1, all kindergarten through third grade Tier 2 or Tier 3 interventions have to be entered into the tab. That's only for new interventions that started second semester. So if you've got a student who, and for a lot of you all know this is your first day back, so if you've got a student who came back and is just now starting into a new intervention, you would have to enter those students in. However, you do not have to go back into the fall semester and enter those students. So again, that's only for students who are identified second semester or after January 1 for Tier 2 or Tier 3 intervention. So you don't have to back up and document anything. Now, a lot of districts already did this voluntarily. So if you're doing it voluntarily, go ahead, keep doing what you were doing. So again, all Tier 2, Tier 3, K-3 interventions for this semester forward have to be entered into the intervention tab. Now again, keep in mind that they also have to, just like the high school kids, have the RTI plan and the progress monitoring. So again, all that has remained the same. Now, optional for January through June of this year is something new in the ESS tab, and that is to document daytime in the comments one box for all ESS waiver students. It is our plan that second semester we will either A, have a different way to document this, or B, we will continue with this requirement in just the way that you see here on the screen. So we're going to try to actually do it a little differently, I hope, by then. So again, that's optional. You do not have to do it for this year. Also, you have optional preschool intervention tab use. Now, keep in mind, that is not something that we are handling in our branch or our division. That's something that you'll need to contact preschool directly for information about. So I've gotten a lot of emails and things after a presentation I did a couple months ago. You'll need to contact preschool directly about that. Now, just as a reminder, all school personnel who enter records into the intervention tab must be granted tool rights to the PLP tab and should have access to the PLP data report. So what I'm saying to you, our KSIS folks throughout the state, is anybody who's going to be entering this data in, there may be some new people, particularly with the K3, Tier 2, and Tier 3 input, who might need new access to the tab. So they have to have that in order to input the records into the tab. So let's talk here about the required users for the intervention tab, and this is another fun one. Our legislation says specifically that focus schools beyond third year, all novice students have to be entered into the tab. However, the commissioner has said there aren't any focus schools for this year. So even though, and we have to say it because it's in legislation. So there are no beyond third year focus schools this year, but we have to say it because it's actually in our legislation. So what I'm saying is the first one that you see on the screen, no one is really going to have to enter this year. So if you've already done that voluntarily, again, you'll need to exit those students and provide an exit code. Now, who is required are all ESS students, and that's all students served by ESS. Keep in mind that ESS can look a couple of different ways. Daytime, out of school, and what we've gotten a lot from a lot of folks is if it is an academic intervention that occurs outside of the school day, it is an extended school service and has to be documented in the tab. It also has to have all documentation as far as sign in, sign out. So if a teacher stays to assist a student, that is an ESS service because it's extended school service outside of the school day. So even if they're not paid for it, it's still an extended school service because it is an academic outside of the school day service. So if it's something to keep them on grade level, then that's still required documentation. All students served by the Mathematics Achievement Fund, MAF or RTA. And finally, as we've already talked about here, all K-3 students enrolled on or after January 1, 2018 in Tier 2 and 3 interventions must have their interventions entered into the tab. Any questions so far, ladies? Okay. All right, so what I've done here, and obviously you'll be able to download a copy of this presentation, is I've put live links in here for the data standard and the Infinite Campus Intervention tab on the KDE webpage. I'd recommend if you haven't been over there lately that you go take a look, just because we have some videos up there on how to actually input the data in there and how to quality check your data in there. So if you haven't gone and taken a look at that in the last little bit, then I recommend you do that. I get calls all the time. I actually just got an email today, someone asking, what happened, why can't I input information into the ESS tab? The ESS tab has not been used now in about 3 years, Lisa? 4 years. So again, all ESS data goes into the PLP intervention tab. So I still get questions all the time about the ESS tab. So remember that all your ESS is documented just like interventions in the intervention tab. All righty, so this is probably what a lot of folks out there, particularly at the school level, the folks who are entering the records, find the most useful. What you see on the screen here is in green the areas that are required entry when you open the record. So again, as you create the record, you'll need to make sure that all of these are completed when you're creating the intervention record for the student. So start date, tier status, intervention type, content area, materials code, if you need one, intervention staff, delivery location, delivery method, frequency, and duration. What I tell folks, print this off, put it by your computer as you're entering in the data. Because we'll talk about the data checks here in a minute. Then you won't get the emails from me saying I've checked your data and you have X amount of errors in the system. Also, either when you end the year or when you close out the intervention, you additionally have to complete end date, student service results, and total hours served. So again, that's if you end the intervention, if they exit the intervention, or at the end of the year. All records at the end of the year have to have everything that's on this screen. All the greens, all the reds. So before you leave for the summer, all of this has to be completed. Now, let's talk just a little bit about the items in red here that say end date, student service results, and total hours served. What's important to remember is that we're tracking the intervention, not the student. So for instance, you may have offered a student Orton Gillingham reading, and you've documented that. Orton Gillingham's maximum usually is 20 weeks. And after that 20 weeks, they make you change to another intervention, usually sim reading or sim writing. What you would need to do in that instance is close out the record, complete all the green and all the red, and create another new record documenting the new intervention. Keep in mind, we're tracking the intervention, not the student. So if you are using multiple interventions types with a student over the course of the year, you could have several reading records for that student. Also, keep in mind that if you're offering a Tier 3 intervention, you have to also offer a Tier 2 intervention in a different setting and at a different time. So you have to offer Tier 2 and Tier 3 services separately. They can't be the same. So that has to happen at a different place, a different time. So it can't be, now it can be in the classroom, let me correct that. But you cannot offer Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions concurrently. They have to happen at different times. I want to make sure we don't have any questions about that before I go on. So again, for your folks in your district who are entering in these records, print this off, put it by their workstation. This is the way that you make 100% that data is good quality. Now, how can you, as the KSIS person, how can you, as a data clerk, how can you, as a teacher or a principal administrator, check the data that's in your school? Very simply, once you've been given access or you have given access to that POP tool, you're going to go over on the left-hand side, go down to Kentucky State Reporting, then KDE Reports, and finally down to PLP Intervention Data. You're going to click on that, and then it's going to bring up a page that looks exactly like what's on your screen right now. Now, what we have done is we found an issue last year with the dates and where students were assigned, and we want to thank our friends in Jefferson County for pointing that out to us. They're like, we didn't know anything about this. But Joe Prather, we've worked with Joe very closely about getting that in check. So we want to thank you all for helping us out with that. So what we have done, and Lisa, I don't know if you want to explain kind of how the report pulls as opposed to how it did before.
I can't, it actually hasn't changed yet. We're working on a revision.
Okay.
As the report runs right now, it is limited to the active school year for enrollment data. So it's all, regardless of what you pick on the toolbar, it's using active year. We're going to take that requirement, that restriction off of it so that you can run it for enrollments in different years. And the other thing that was done when we initially rolled out the tab, start date was not a required NIC required data field because the course level interventions we didn't think would need it because we'd be able to tell from the course when the students started. That has become a required field for all intervention records. So now we always have it, but in the past we didn't. So to pick what school the kid was in, we didn't have a good reliable source, and intervention records are not tied to a calendar like most things in campus. So we didn't really know where the kid was, but everybody wanted a school name on the intervention record. So it's always just shown whatever their current enrollment is the school name. So if they had transferred from the elementary school to the middle school and you see an intervention record, it says the middle school name. We're working on changing that where it will match the start date of the intervention record to the best matching primary enrollment of the student and use that school's name so that even if you're looking past history, and it will also show the grade level at that enrollment so that you can tell this intervention was when this kid that's now a seventh grader was in fourth grade, instead of them all getting kind of mixed together and confused like they've been now. So we're hoping to roll that out in our next release. The range that's on here that's always been confusing to everybody because of the way it's labeled, we may be able to tweak that and make it make more sense. But if you pick ranges of dates, that's the start date range, not records that start before and end after, you know, it's not that, it's start dates in between here and here is what that range is doing. So I usually use July 1 to June 30th to try to get any records that started during the year. We see lots of typos. When you pick the calendar in campus, people will accidentally start their record after it ended because they've got the wrong year already on the calendar group. So sometimes you have to run it and pull things without any start date parameters just to look for weirdnesses, or look for ones that start in the future so that you can clean up those and get the dates back reined into the school year because they say they're happening in 2020 or something. So.
Well, my favorite has been 2058, so that's been my favorite so far. But again, that's a key error, and we're perfectly aware of that, but I still, when I send our data checks back out to districts and to schools, I want to make sure that those get corrected, because again, those are just key errors.
And we'll pull our dates we pull by start date, so
Yeah.
it's not gonna be included in your report, so.
Yeah. So again, Lisa was talking about the start date here. Again, the 7/1 of the current school year to the end of the school year, which is 6/30. So 7/1/17 to 6/30/18 for this school year. Obviously, if you need to pull a specific intervention type, you can, or you can just pull all and then filter through Excel, which is actually what I do. It's a lot easier, I think, to do that. That way you get a full look at the records, and you can look at the school as a whole or the district as a whole.
I just realized this, I don't know how many times I've looked at this screenshot and not thought about it. This is the control page for the state edition version of the report, because that's what Jared can see. You don't see that little option of created in district. 'Cause
No.
when you run the report in district, that's the only ones you've got access to, so you don't need that control
Yeah,
box, but.
yeah, I was gonna say, we don't even worry, I really don't ever really mess with that myself, to be honest with you, so. But again, you can pull any or all of these. I would recommend you leave it obviously with XLS, just because it seems to do a little bit better with the data when you pull it. It's more workable. Once you've hit generate report, then you will get a full report of every single intervention that has been input in your school district or your school, depending on what level that you're looking at. And then, and I don't want to steal our thunder on something we're working on, but we are looking at maybe enhancing the error reports here to where it does give feedback, and you just don't have to manually go searching for everything. I don't want to promise and under-deliver, but we are working on that, I can tell you that. So we pull here at KDE, pulled back in October. I'll pull again here in just a couple weeks on the 30th, and then March 30th, and conduct random data reviews. By no means is that a slap on the hand. So I want to clarify that. We have had last year 320,000 intervention records. All of those records have to be combed through by me personally, manually, in order to catch all those errors. So what I'm saying to you is the reason we're doing this data check and talking to schools and districts is that it makes my job, as far as creating the report that comes from it, 50 times easier if I'm being proactive and giving you all feedback. So don't feel like I'm sitting here saying, and it's an opportunity for you all as KSIS contacts to do some professional learning with your folks and to kind of work with them and say, okay, this is why this error is happening over and over again. So again, don't get freaked out if you get the email from me. And just know that it's an opportunity for you to ask questions if you have them, for me to help you. I mean, that's why we're doing it. We're not doing it to be mean or what have you. We're doing it to really help you. That's the reason we're doing it. Now, what we've had to do, this year we've switched from doing school level feedback to doing district level feedback. And what we're doing is we are sending an email to the superintendent, the KSIS contact, And if it's specifically an ESS issue, I include the ESS coordinators on it. So it goes to several people. I attach with it a report that is highlighted with the errors. And then I also say you had 56 records with this issue wrong with it, or miskeyed. My plan is to do is to audit or look at every single district in the state at least once every 2 years. So I'm pulling around 25 to 40 on October 30th, January 30th, what have you, to do that. Also keep in mind that at the end of the year, when your ESS person has to submit their required IC report, that they are certifying that you as the KSIS contact have checked that data with them. They are taking that and saying, this has been done. So when the errors occur, I will typically email the KSIS contact and say, these are the errors we found, let's double check this data. So, but the problem with that is, folks, we don't check that until June 30th. If you all know anything, I think teachers aren't really working the first week of July. But we can't, because of the requirements, check that before then. So the more checking we could do on the front end, the easier it's going to be for all of us. So that's the reason I want to encourage you all to pull your reports and take a look at them. So everything, with the exception of ESS Summer School, has to be entered, dated, and finalized by June 30th. Remember the red and green we talked about? All those things have to be input. Everything has to be dated. Everything has to have a results code. Now, again, ESS Summer School data is due by September 30th. We do have some new guidance that will be coming out for the next year as far as how to document summer school. So we'll be talking to you all about that here in just a couple months, but we do have some new guidance on how to track summer school data starting with July 1, 18. So just keep that in mind. Right now, everything's copacetic. So again, common issues we found, we've talked about the end dates and service results. Again, if the student exits the intervention earlier, we've talked about that, then the end of the year, enter that closing data. New records should not be created each quarter for a continuing intervention. So again, we're tracking the intervention over time. So if that kid is enrolled in intervention in September and remains in it until May, when are you going to touch it? September and May. You don't need to be in there looking around, and if nothing changes with that intervention, the only thing, and this is a misconception with the intervention team, we are entering, we're exiting. We're not doing, unless there is one district I know that requires their folks to go in and input hours at least monthly, Jefferson County. That district does require that their folks go in and do progress monitoring in there. But the state does not require that. So your district may, but the state does not have that requirement. Now, if multiple records are created for the same intervention, a district user will be responsible for combining those records. So if you've gone in and you've created 4 MAF records, we cannot correct those records. Those have to be corrected at the school or district level. We don't have the option to correct those. So you have to go back in and delete that record, and right now the only way we have to do that is student by student. There is no mass way to edit that. So again, we talked about this. If a child changes tier levels in a subject area, you mark it to exited to another intervention. So if they're a tier 3 going down to a tier 2, they're still continuing that intervention, but they're exiting tier 3 status. Now, you also need to create a new record for each new tier. So if you have a kid who right now is in tier 2 and you've made the decision to escalate them to tier 3 for this semester, they would continue with the tier 2 intervention, and then you would create a new tier 3 record for that student with the content and whatever materials you're using with that student. Make sense? I saw a look or two, that's why I was waiting. All right.
You got 5 minutes?
Yep. Code 3 continuing intervention is not to be used, is to be used rather at the end of the school year only. It's not, remember what we said? If you started in September, October, you end it in May. So you don't need to be in there in December saying, oh, well, they're going to continue an intervention into the spring. The only time that's used is for year-to-year rollover. This continues to be the most common error that we see. Please do not use 5 graduated did not meet goals for elementary or middle school. That's for 12th graders only, and yes, we do see that very frequently. If you're using 6 other in the exit criteria and the student results, it must be described in the student service results other box. An example would be a special education referral. So that's where there's 2 places you can document that. There is a click tab down at the bottom that says referred. You have to go searching for it, or you can put 6 other and simply put in referred to special education. So for type 2, we talked about this. This is for students outside of the school day, and this is for students served by Gear Up, 21st Century, Save the Children. They have to be documented as an extended school service because it is academic to get them back on grade level outside of the school day. Intervention type 8 other. If this content is used, the content area must be described, and it cannot be any of the others. It can't be, and you can't combine. You can't say reading, writing, math, underwater basket weaving, all on the same line. You need to create separate records for each content area. 8 other is typically used for things like language, health and PE, those sort of things that aren't in the drop-down box already. So again, if you're using 5 vendor program, we have the Infinite Campus Intervention tab, materials reference and code sheet, that when you download this presentation, you can get a link to that as well. It's also on the Infinite Campus Intervention tab page. If you use Material 7 Other, you have to contact either myself or April in order to use that. We should probably have less than 10 of those statewide. We should probably have fewer than 10 of those statewide entered as 7 Other on materials. Now, we are constantly working to change the intervention tab. I can tell you that we are working very hard to make it much, much easier on the user end. I don't want to go into necessarily some of the details, but we are working on a different way to document some things where that users will find it, we think, much easier. Try to incorporate drop downs instead of hand keying many things to cut down on the amount of errors. So just so you know, it is a work in progress. Lisa has been working very diligently.
We won't change it during this school year.
We won't change
so
it,
it'd be for next year, it'd be a summer change kind of thing. So.
I wouldn't want to do that to you for any amount of money. Would not want to make a big change where that's concerned. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. The only silly question is the one left unasked. I'll say that to you. So with that said.
You have 2 questions
Okay.
online, and one's a clarification. If
Yes.
a teacher has students come early to school for academic assistance, not as part of paid ESS,
They still have to document it as ESS because it's an extended school service. It's for academics outside of the school day.
okay? As far as behavior and RTI, K through 3, if a district is a PBIS school and uses all the PBIS specific forms for tracking, do we need to enter the data into the intervention tab also, or can we upload the documents into the PLP tab under documents?
No, you still have to document the actual Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention in the tab. The documentation, the tracking data would be their progress monitoring, and we talked about keeping that separately from the PLP, or from the PLP entry.
Those are the only online questions. Do we have questions in the room? Sorry.